I'm going to go fight a demon that may eat me. Why the crap? Now I have to do it because I was born to a family of witches that like literally were cursed. And
Mm.
if I don't do this, I will be a slave to this demon as an adult. Okay, great. Why are you coming with me?
Yeah.
like
What's your stakes in this thing?
you're just like, oh, I just like Drake enough. I'm just gonna go. It's gonna be awesome. Like they give
Yeah,
me
I'm,
a
I'm gonna go carry water so Drake can fight it. What?
releasing your inner dragon.
Okay, so Drake, what do you think is the critical part of writing a non-romantic relationship?
Well, I want to start by saying I don't think people give credit to non-romantic relationships as far as their difficulty. I actually think non-romantic relationships are harder to pull off than romantic relationships because everybody wants to fall in love. But when you don't have that component, I think that actually makes it much more difficult. Um, I mean, for me, everything centers around the fact that where I think people fail the most on creating their secondary and tertiary characters is they treat them as secondary and tertiary characters. And I preach this all the time. Every character in your story, even the bartender who only says 3 coppers, please, and that's it, you never see him again, he's actually the hero in his story. It's just that his story intersected with this story by just blipping in for just a briefest of a moment. But still, I want to know a little bit more. But now I'm not going to waste a huge amount of time. I'm not going to make an entire character portfolio and go through his backstory and all the different things. But I want to know what he wants in that moment. Maybe, and I have this exercise where I tell people just talk to them. Just sit down and talk with them. So I might sit down with that bartender and like, hey, you're only in the story for a second. You say 3 coppers and that's it. But like, what do you want today? He said, you know what I want? I want Sally. She's just been crawling up my rear and I want to fire her. That's what I want. I'm tired of Sally. She's not doing her job. She was late again today. Like, because then even just that little bit, that's going to change how I run that character when it comes to, 3 coppers, please. Just knowing that little bit, or, actually, you know what? I just met this dude and I'm so much in love with him and it's hard, in this society for 2 men to find each other and whatever and like I'm just happy. I'm just like really really happy. And it's like then you're like, okay, that's a completely different thing. And I don't think people do that. They don't treat their secondary, especially their tertiary characters as real living characters. They're props. And I think if you treat them as a prop, they're going to feel like a prop.
And I think that is probably one of the biggest things you have to do, very much so, if you're going to pull off any kind of non-romantic relationships. Both sides of the equation, the point of view character and the friend or the parent or the mentor or whatever else it is, need to be fully fleshed out characters with their own desires that mustn't always align.
Especially when you get into secondary characters.
They need to have differences of opinion, they need to have different strengths, they need to be complete characters, preferably with their own little arcs. And that, I think, takes me to one of my most important things. Friendships or any relationship actually needs its own arc. It needs to have a beginning, and you need to know what that beginning is. Did they start, if it's a friendship, did the 2 people start as friends? Or were they enemies? Or were they acquaintances? What is the start? And then where are they going to end up? Maybe they end up as enemies.
Mhm.
Maybe they end up as best friends. Maybe they end up in maybe it's a friends to lovers, and they end up as lovers. But
Maybe
you
they
need to
hold
know
hands as they drive off a cliff to their deaths.
exactly. It can be, but whatever the end is, you need to know what that end is. And then you need to have an arc,
Yeah.
as you would have for a character or a story.
Just to add to that, 100% agree with all of that. The only thing I'm going to add is you need to know two things from the beginning: where they're at the story's beginning, and then where their friendship actually kind of became.
Mm,
So many people are
yeah.
like, oh, they're just best friends.
Mm.
And that's what they go with. They're like, yeah, no, Sally is just John's best friend at the beginning of the story. It's like, okay, why?
Why? Yeah.
How did they get together? Why? Because if Sally's going to be the secondary character, what's the history that has created this friendship? Because that is going to change how you run their relationship. And also, it's going to give you insight into how that arc is going to happen as they're moving through it. So, while I do think that what I said at the beginning with your tertiary characters is a must, and also the only thing that's required, just
Yeah, yeah,
really, you're in my story for this moment because you're a tertiary character. What are you doing today? What do you
yeah,
want to accomplish today in this scene that you're in? What is your motivation? I don't care who your parents were. I don't care where you came from. I don't care what you're doing tomorrow. Like, I don't care about it, but I do want to know where your head's at now. And I
yes.
think that's all you need. Secondary characters who are going to be in the story for, chapters, if not from start to finish, those characters I think you should put as much detail into as you do your main character.
I agree. A secondary character is effectively a main character. Okay, they are just not the focus character.
They're not the one telling the story.
Yeah, yeah, but they are definitively like an integral, important element that it deserves main character energy.
And I think that's where we're going to focus our discussion on today, because I,
Yeah,
I don't really think our discussion is about the relationships with tertiary characters.
no,
I think it's about those characters that are more integral. Now, that being said, maybe mom is a tertiary character. That is going to require a little bit more prep work than the bartender, even
sure.
though mom is only in one scene, maybe two scenes, whatever. So, you know, none of these are hard. You can't just say, oh, all tertiary characters are going to be treated this way and all secondary characters are going to
Yeah.
be treated that way.
Also, bear in mind, we give advice, guys. They're not rules. You can write your story any way you like.
Yeah,
You can
100%.
also build your world any way you like. It is okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's, but I think that's where most of the things that we're going to talk about, all comes from. I guess before we get into like, how do we build it? I think we should define what we mean when we talk about the chemistry between characters, the relationship. You can call it chemistry, whatever you want,
Hmm,
kind of what that means. So some of the notes that I have are, what we're talking about here is their dynamics of their relationship. What is the in every relationship? So we have a lot of different types of relationships. So obviously we're not talking about lovers in
yeah,
that relationship, but there are friend relationships. There are parent-child relationships. There are sibling relationships. There are enemy relationships. There are mentor-mentee relationships. I think the big thing that I always think about is, and I know this is a faux pas word in today's world, but there are hierarchies to all relationships. They just are. And sometimes those hierarchies are, we're equal, and that's great. Sometimes those hierarchies are, no, 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 I'm in charge and you're subordinate. And so I think it's
I
important.
wouldn't describe it as a hierarchy, because a hierarchy to me implies more of like a societal structure, at least for me. So I would describe what you're calling, I would describe uh the dominance relationship between the friends or the power imbalance between the friends.
Power imbalance, yeah, whatever
Yeah,
word,
yeah,
we want to use it.
yeah.
It's weird.
Because the thing with hierarchy is hierarchy to me implies multiple people and a
Right,
structure, right? That's what
right,
it,
right. Well, the weirdest thing about me, chase a rabbit, while in prose every word matters,
yeah.
like every word, every verb, every adjective, everything. I'm just
Mm.
like it's everything paints a picture. When I'm in verbal communication, words don't matter to me at all. And it's just it's this weird dynamic between my two lives of prose
Mm.
writing and speech writing, or
Yeah.
talking. So yeah, as long as you're getting the meaning of what I'm saying,
Yeah.
because it's a discussion and we can have back and forth. And I think that's the reason why I am so focused on the written word, because it's not a discussion. It's a
Yes.
one-way flow of information. So if I screw
Yes.
up and I say a word that you don't interpret right, there's no way for me to correct you. So like with this, I can say hierarchy and you go, well, and we go, okay, whatever, let's
Yeah.
define this and make sure we're on the same page, because it's a
Mm.
discussion. And
Yeah.
so I don't mind, like I really don't have a lot of loyalty to words when I'm in a discussion, as long as we both know what we're talking about,
Yeah.
so that we get to to the end game. But yeah, power dynamics, whatever we want to talk
Mm.
about. I think it's important to define that. I think it's important to understand, if you have a friend group, who is in charge, and it's not even in charge of of the whole. So look at Ron, Hermione, um
Harry.
and Harry. There are multiple different power dynamics. I mean, Hermione is more in charge of education. Like, so when it comes to anything that are factual and, history and things that we need to know of why things are the way they are, she holds all the power.
Mm.
When it comes to the magic world, Ron holds all the power. The other two are muggles.
Mm.
Like, I mean, I know Harry's not a muggle, but he grew up as a muggle. So he's not the expert. So when it comes to, what do you mean you don't know what the flu network is? Like,
Mm.
what do you mean you don't know how to do this, that, and the other thing? Like, these
Mm.
are just things that I lived with my whole life. And it literally happens the moment he meets Ron on the train, where he's like, oh, I got this card. Wait, where'd he go? It's like, what do you mean, where'd he go? He's not gonna hang out on your card all the time. You got other cards he's got to go hang out on. Like, to Ron, he has all the power of that
Mm.
dynamic. And so that's what I mean by this hierarchy of things. It's going to change depending on even what topic we're talking about here. So like with me, when I'm around my friends, I hold all the power when it comes to writing, and they hold all the power for everything else, because I'm a complete moron of all aspects of life outside of this one thing that I can do. So, it's just the way it is.
So, so yeah. So there's definitely that also leads into something that I want to talk about a little later, which is complementary skills. But I
Mhm.
do first want to talk about power dynamics more broadly,
Mhm.
because you you can be friends with your parents. Yeah. And but you become more than at the beginning. It's the power imbalance is vast. Okay. Like when you're 5 and your parent is the adult, like the gulf is enormous. It's unbridgeably enormous, right? When you are 18 and your parent is presumably at least 15 odd years older than you are. My mother was 40 years older than I am, so
That a 4-0?
yeah, 40.
Oh, mine
Yeah,
was a 1-6.
yeah. So, so that's what I'm saying. But they're somewhat older, right?
Right.
There's still a fairly vast gulf, but you start becoming friends with them. When
Actually,
I was,
the way I've seen it usually works out is, um, you are dependent on your parents until you hit, 13, 14. Then you hate them and they're idiots until you're about 23, 24. And then you're like, wow, I want to hang. You're kind of cool again. I'll hang out with you again. So that's the power dynamics. One, they're your boss. Two, they're your enemy. And then three, they're your equal. So it's this
yeah,
weird kind of way. And that's just obviously generalizing. Not everyone goes through that dynamic, but a lot of humans go through that kind of dynamic.
I I became friends with my, well, I went to the point of being friends with my mom around after I finished university around 25, 26. And I think the moment that cemented it forever in my head was we were watching a movie and they were doing some sort of family discussion or whatever. And like there was sexual content on the screen. And I cannot remember how the topic came up. My mother and father are divorced. Um, But my mother said something like, your father was actually quite good at that. And without batting an eyelid, I looked at it and went, so I was at least fun to make. And she says, yes, you were. And I was like, okay, we're friends now. This is
And I guess if you're lucky, you're with your parents long enough to where you become the adult, and you
yeah,
take care of them,
yeah,
um, because circle of life, baby.
yep,
Um, so yeah, but we're writing a story that usually is a small sliver of that time, and so
yes.
we need to know. I think it's very important to know who is
What your
going to take
so
the
so
lead.
the parental power balance is a definite thing by itself, and it's a very shifting thing, and that's why I said there's arcs,
Yeah.
right? So there's the parental kind of power imbalance, but there's also power imbalance with mentorship that closes over time,
Hmm.
right? So when you first have a mentor, there might be a massive power imbalance. Yeah. Even if you take like us over the past 3 years, when we first met, I knew very little about writing. You knew a lot. Over the 3 years, I've been catching up, and our power imbalance, that power, like, and this is the thing that people misunderstand about a power imbalance. It doesn't mean force.
Right.
It means one person knows or is more equipped for whatever the thing is, and the other person is less equipped. And so one person takes the lead in a very natural way, generally speaking, a very natural way. There is, of course, very unhealthy power dynamics, but that's a different topic.
Right. Which I think is
So,
funny when you go back and listen to the first probably 6 months of our podcasts.
yeah,
I'm speaking way, way more than you are. But by about 6 months, like you just start finding your own, you start, you really come into your own knowledge, your own everything. And so, yeah, it's been great
yeah.
watching.
But that, I mean, it's a very direct illustration of that kind of mentorship power balance changing as the mentee catches the because
Right.
like it's impossible for a mentor to remain always ahead of the mentee.
Right.
Like,
Well, if you're a good
because
mentor, if you're a
yeah,
crappy mentor and you keep them down, which I think a lot
sure.
of college professors try to do, uh, like, yeah, but and then in my defense, because this conversation is making me feel weird. I mean, I remember our original discussions, and your original pitch to me was, you'll be like the sidekick, and
Yeah,
I'll be the writer. And I said, literally, absolutely not. We are
yeah,
both equals from jump. Even if I know more than you about this subject, we're both writers
yeah.
doing this together. And I wouldn't allow it to be.
No, 100%. No, so I mean, I don't mean like we had some kind of
No, no,
formalized,
no. I
but
know, I
I'm
know.
just saying, like it was the natural state of our
Right,
relationship at that point.
right.
Um, and and so you do need to think about that power dynamic between your characters that you're putting into this non-romantic relationship and how that is going to change and why.
And that's actually a really interesting, it wasn't any notes, but that's a really interesting thing. If you're writing a mentor mentee relationship, like one way to decide which way you're going to go is exactly what we just said. If the mentee never catches up to the mentor, then it's probably because the mentor is doing toxic things
Yeah,
and then maybe that's a great source of conflict where the mentee realizes that what they thought was the person trying to get them ahead is actually trying to keep them down and
yeah,
not allowing them to succeed. I mean, I've said to many, many, many of the people who have worked with me, that started off as newer writers. Yeah, I mean, I just said this to a woman just the other day. I was like, remember, don't forget about us little guys when you're, you know, on top of the pile. Like, and she started off, she started coming to me as a student knowing very, very little. And now, she's doing her thing. And so like, but I find no better. I mean, one of the guys in the peanut gallery, I said this to just this morning because it's the same thing. I think the best thing that I love about teaching writing, my favorite moments are when you have someone come to you and go, I want to write like this. And you're like, okay, this is what you have to do. And the next week, it's like, you're still not doing it. This is what you have to do. And the next week, you're still not doing this, what you have to do. And next week, you're still not doing it. Like for months and months and months, you're editing the exact same stuff and you're saying the exact same things. You're saying them different ways, trying to get it to click. And then all of a sudden they show up and what they bring is nothing like what they brought last week. I don't know. I talked about this last night in the writer's room, that it's just this weird, because it happened last night. It's this weird, it's almost like knowledge is like a rubber band. And so the writer's in the middle of it and they're learning more and more and more, but they're not moving forward. The rubber band is moving forward, but they're not. And then all of a sudden, blink, they get shot forward and then they catch up to the rubber band. But then, again, the rubber band starts moving forward without them. So they're, I don't know, it's just weird. And I love it. I think it's the best thing about my days are when that happens. So it is fantastic.
Yeah. But yeah, so power dynamics, fully fleshed out characters, and that arc, I think, are pretty key components,
Yeah.
in my opinion, for creating relationships.
And that'll give you some hints on, when you are running a mentor mentee character, how to run the mentor character. Are they genuinely trying to help their mentee? If you have someone who's willing to die, like an Obi-Wan Kenobi, who's like, well, the last lesson I need to teach you is me getting killed. Like that's a mentor willing to
Yeah.
do it all for their student, as opposed to, you know, them discovering that the mentor may not have their best interest at heart. I can't think of any examples except for in Chinese cinema. Like there's a lot of Chinese kung fu movies where the student learned that the master was actually not really helping them. They were, because they had all these students show up and they were cooking all the food and cleaning all the place and doing all the stuff and and actually they played with it in uh Karate Kid,
Yeah.
where he thinks you're just doing this to get me to clean your car and you're just doing this to get me like, and then he's like, show me wax on. And then he transitioned that into why it was good for him to do this stuff. But I forgot they did play with that, where he did confront him and said, you're an evil mentor, you're only using me to clean your stuff.
I've definitely, oh, I know where I've seen it. But it was the villains using it. There's a writer called Trudy Canavan who wrote the Black Magician trilogy,
Hmm.
and the villainous magicians would keep like a whole little stable of apprentices around them. And whenever they needed power, they would just slice one of the apprentices open and steal their power.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I've seen it many times
yeah,
on villains.
yeah,
I was trying to think of a time where the story, had the mentor be that
yeah,
kind of, because then that's a cool thing for the POV to get over, because now they have to discover that they're not in a healthy situation and then also overcome that. Because
mm,
that's also just like with everybody else in an unhealthy relationship, you have that terror of, yeah, but the devil I know. Like I
yes,
know it's not a good relationship for me, but I know it. Like I
yes,
know what I'm getting out of this. And that's why so many people stay in toxic relationships, because it's still the
yes,
devil you know versus the devil you don't know. So
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
good plot, thematic arc as well
yeah,
for that relationship. So
yeah,
yeah, all sorts of, and again, it's just everything we're going to talk about is all about fleshing out ahead of time these things. So I guess, since we have, well, that's the relationship dynamics. I didn't even finish this chemistry list. Kind of the the way they treat each other is another part of that
mm,
chemistry. And then that chemistry becomes all sorts of things. Depending on what you're doing, it could be a source of conflict, a source of growth, um, a source of humor, um, maybe even a source of intrigue. Like with Harry Potter, when Hermione had the time turner,
mm,
she became very like, the others were like, you're not doing something right for us. Are you, you know, there was a little bit of that. Are you doing,
conflict,
yeah, are you
yeah,
doing bad things? What's going on here? Because I'm not seeing your day-to-day stuff. So all of these things, I just want to kind of define that. That's what we're talking about here. These are all things that we're going to go through of ways to build that relationship, that dynamics between them, which gives us all these benefits as storytellers.
Yeah.
So when we get into this, I mean, because we're really just going to be focusing on secondary characters at this point and then important tertiary characters, but let's just say secondary characters. What do you think? You already said your first one, which is you need to know where the relationship starts
Mm.
and where it ends so that you know that there's going to be an arc in that relationship. It can't be static. It can't
Yeah.
be, I hate you and I hate you. I mean, even look at Malfoy. I don't what's going on with me and Harry Potter today? Like it's the only, only one that keeps popping up in my mind. But like Malfoy, we start off as this I hate you, but we end with a I don't really like you. Like, it definitely changes.
Or Joffrey Baratheon from like Game of Thrones. We start off with I hate you, and we start off with die, piggy, die, die. It just becomes more.
Right, right, which is an arc.
It is an arc.
So yeah. Um, the next
I
thing you want to talk
swear,
about,
if there's one thing that George Martin excels at, it is making villains that I want to see dead. Like,
which is why I hate what he did with Jamie.
yeah,
I
well,
liked hating him. I liked hating his guts. And now, you get in a book 4 and you're like, he's actually not that bad. I don't like feeling this way. I don't like feeling that he's not a bad person. Like, I don't want that. It is actually one of the things that bothered me about that 4th book. I did not like that I started to like Jamie because I really enjoyed hating him. He was a great, I mean, screwing his sister, throwing small children off of roofs, killing the king because he's saving his own skin. Like these are all things that I want to hate. And
mm.
then you're like, now you're gonna make me like him? It was rough. It was rough.
Uh,
Um, I guess
at
that
least he
leads
never did that with Joffrey. Joffrey is just like you can hate him to your heart's content and cheer at the purple wedding.
right, exactly. Um, but that leads us to your thing that you've already brought up, so I'll pitch it over to
Yeah.
you. And I remember now what I called it. I called it strengths and weaknesses. So
Mm.
a character's strength should overcome another character's weaknesses. That's why I was saying
Yeah.
balance. You called it complementary.
Complementary.
Yeah.
They should complement each other. So,
What do
and
you
what
mean by
that
this?
means is, so if you Han Solo and Luke Skywalker are actually a really good example of this. So Luke is young and idealistic, and Han is experienced, but that makes him cynical. And the two together bring together a great dynamic for overcoming the story's plot with Luke's kind of, enthusiasm and his naivete in driving forward, but sometimes too much, sometimes in excess. And Han's kind of more experienced take and his slower look, and also but then his cynicism can sometimes take him completely out, as it did, in the final.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was Luke's impact on Han that made him turn around and come back.
Yeah. And of
Just
course, I
at
mean,
the same time.
the other classic example is Samwise Gamgee and Frodo,
Mhm.
um, who are very much complementary
Mhm.
um,
Well,
souls.
even, I already went through the dynamics of Ron,
Mm,
Hermione, and Harry. Each
yes,
one have their strengths and weaknesses, and
yes,
the other can have strengths that cover up the weaknesses. And
yes.
that's a lot of reasons why people, I mean, me and my wife have been married 24 years, and I think one of the biggest reasons why we are so compatible is that we're completely not compatible in our strengths and weaknesses. We're almost exactly opposite on, we have very little overlap on the things that I'm strong on, she's also strong on. We have a lot of overlap in our interests,
Mm,
but very little overlap on, I mean, just in the 26, 27 years we've been together, like there's this huge divide of of life. Like
mm,
these things in life, I don't even look at. I don't think about, I don't touch, I don't even know. Like my wife has no idea even how to get to our bank or what we have in our bank, or because she
mm,
cannot, like I tried in the beginning because I try to be equal with everything. I'm like, you should also pay some bills. And she just literally broke down as a blubbering, you know, she's like, I can't take this. It's too much stress. And then, like, especially back then when we were, young couples and making every penny count and trying to figure out how to pay the electrical bill or whatever. Um, it just wasn't her strength. She just doesn't,
Yeah.
she can't deal with it. And then there's so many things that she is my rock for.
Mm.
And so that's what we're looking for. I mean, that's a natural way to connect your characters is I need this thing that I don't have. You provide that. Wow, we should hang out because, I mean, the Bugs Bunny or the Bugs Bunny dogs, you have the one little dog and you have the one big dog. And, why are they friends? Because they both bring something to the table that the other just doesn't have.
I do want to give one warning about this kind of like like this is important and you do need strength and weaknesses covered. But unless this is what you're actually going for, try to avoid writing purely transactional
Oh,
relationships.
certainly.
Because okay. So there are people in this world who have completely transactional relationships. I get it. I don't work that way, so I don't understand what they get out of those friendships. Or how that is a friendship to them. But that doesn't feel like a real friend. At least it doesn't to me feel like a real friendship when everything is transactional.
Yeah.
What do I get out of you?
Right.
Like
Right.
that feels like a villainous relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hope that's not way I came off like with
Yeah.
my wife's relationship. We are
No.
together because our interests align and we have so
Yeah.
much in common that matter.
Yeah.
The way we view life, the way we view family, the way we view marriage, the way we view that stuff. I'm talking about just the day to day, like,
No. I don't mean to say that you came off like that. I was just reminded of a comment that somebody left on my YouTube channel that had me staring at it for hours thinking like, I wonder if you're a psychopath. Like it was the only thing I could think. Because they were like, well, if women didn't get guaranteed child support, they would have to be very obedient to their men, or their men would just leave them with their children, and then the women would be stuck raising their children alone. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this comment.
yeah. And
See?
as somebody who has a father who left without, he only made his very first child support payment on me.
Yeah,
Like,
my father too. Like,
I don't see how they get guaranteed child
no,
support. So,
no,
um, you know,
yeah,
it's
yeah. But yeah, it was such a
yeah. And I
transactional
also want
way.
to say, I want to go on record and say this. This
Yeah,
is this is officially me stating this on the record.
yeah.
Never once did I stay with my wife so that I wouldn't have to pay child support.
Yes.
Not once.
That
Not
is the
one
most
time
ridiculous thing.
did that
But it,
ever come into
but
my
that was
head
the
of,
thing. It was
man,
so
I'd like to leave her, but then I'd have to pay that damn child support.
it
Not
was such a weird statement. I was just like, how transactional do you have to
right,
view the world?
right,
This is how you break down a romantic relationship.
right,
Never mind a non-romantic one.
right.
Like,
And now that my kids are basically 21 and 22, like
yeah,
that is, now it definitely is a thing. But like,
yeah,
I don't know, not one time in our marriage have I ever
yeah.
thought, wow, if it just wasn't for that mandatory child support, I'd be on the road. No, not once. Just saying,
Yeah.
that's official. Like,
Because she didn't treat me nice. Like, what?
just saying, you can quote me on that. That's an official thing. Um. Anyway, that's a weird turn of events.
Sorry. That comment's been bugging me. That comment's been living rent-free in my head, to be honest with you.
Yeah, yeah. It's always fun. All right, so strengths and weaknesses. You should think about that because you need, when we talk about character development, we want characters with weaknesses. A character who has no flaws is just not relatable. They're just too perfect in every way. And that's where you get, I think, a lot of the Mary Sue secondary characters. Because why wouldn't you be a Mary Sue to someone who is perfect in every way?
Yeah.
You know,
I think one of the good ways to think about this is you don't want to have a Batman and Robin, because ain't nobody want to be Robin. Batman's there in his full-fledged suit, and Robin's wearing a Speedo. With an R on it. You know what I mean?
yeah. But that's a holdover. I mean, that's the problem with some of these IPs is they're a holdover from, the 20s and 30s when we're just like, I don't know anything about this whole story thing. Let's just do, what we would call tropes today. They didn't have tropes back then because they didn't exist because they, hadn't been made yet.
So, I mean, yes and no. Some of it, so I think part of it, like things with Batman and Robin and so on, I think part of it was too much leaning into the power dynamic of there was too much uneven power dynamic because of the time. And when I say the time was an unequal time, I don't just mean unequal between men and women or between races, I mean everything was unequal. You still had countries that had nobility, where they were like, these families are born better, as though humans can be literally born better. So it was a very unequal time. And I think those power dynamics are a product of that.
Yeah.
Where you have like an extreme and a junior, and the power dynamic between them never changes.
Right. Which is why, as we move forward in time, you get more of the stories about Robin and, Darkwing and, all of that because society evolves and our stories will evolve with us. So that's the strengths and weaknesses. I think that goes along with my next point because they're kind of very much related. There also has to be a reason for the relationship. And I think this needs to go more than just there's a reason why we're together. What I mean by this is I'm going to go fight a demon that may eat me. Why the crap? Now, I have to do it because I was born to a family of witches that, like, literally were cursed. And if I don't do this, I will be a slave to this demon as an adult. Okay, great. Why are you coming with me?
Yeah. What's your stakes in this thing?
You're just like, I just like Drake enough. I'm just gonna go. It's gonna be awesome. Like,
I'm gonna go carry water so Drake can fight it. What?
Even though I might get eaten too.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be an actual motivational, plot-driven reason why your secondary characters are willing to do this. And it could be whatever. I mean, Batman and Robin. Why is Robin going to danger? Because he's the mentee. He's trying to learn to be the next Batman. Although it never really happens, but
that's because comic books can't change. Like they're physically incapable of actually,
exactly. But that is something that's there. In Harry Potter's case, even though Harry's the one that's been marked by by Voldemort, all of the wizarding world is in danger. So both Hermione and Ron are going to lose big time if Voldemort wins. So they have a personal stake in this fight as much as anyone else. And when you get into epic stuff, that becomes much easier because of the fact that the whole world is going to die if we don't do this. So why am I helping you? Well, because I'm going to die too. Like,
exactly.
Sure, the demon eats your soul, but after he eats your soul, he kills all the rest of us or, dominates us or whatever. So I still don't want that to happen. So that becomes easier. But I still think you need to have, again,
you need to have stakes. They need to have investment in the plot, the secondary characters. They don't just need to be fully fleshed out. And their stakes in the plot can't be, I want to save my friend's life.
Right.
Like, that is an ancillary stake that will get them over a hump, but it can't be the only stake.
Right. And that's...
It can be a romantic interest only stake.
Right.
But if that is the friends only stake, that is a friendship of the, you know, of the ages.
Right.
Like,
Well, a great example of that would be Stranger Things.
yeah,
Like, we do want to save our friend.
yes,
That is kind of the original. But as we learn stuff, we start realizing, oh, this is the destruction of the whole world too.
yes.
So the saving of the one first boy, I can't remember his name for whatever reason.
Yeah, the season one,
Right.
yeah. And
That's
it it,
great. But
it
now
starts with like, yeah.
it grows.
And it starts with like, we want to save him, then they discover what's involved. And a lot of them are like, back away because it's too much,
Right.
right? That you're like, yes, you want to save your friend, but I mean, we're talking about like, the upside down is
I
it's
like Drake. I didn't realize he was going to get eaten by a demon.
yeah,
Like, I just thought he owed, like, some money to a bully.
yeah. Like I could have lent them some money.
We're talking
Like this
eternal
is a little,
damnation here.
this is extreme.
So, but that's when I tell you that
Yeah,
after me, they
yeah,
enslave you too. So,
yes. And
and then,
then of course the stakes change again,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I just think that's important. I think a lot of people don't do that with their secondary characters. They're just
Mm.
there because they're there. All
Yeah.
right, what are some, yeah, something else for,
Oh, I think just before we move on from this, I do also feel like if you're going to build such an intense friendship, it behooves you to have the secondary character involved in the overcome. One of the key moments of Luke and Han's friendship is when Han shoots Darth Vader and gives Luke the run, right? He is involved in the overcome. One of the key moments of Samwise is when he carries Frodo into the cave, when he goes back to, like he is involved in the overcome. If you're going to invest that deeply in a friendship, it is a good idea to build the character into the overcome.
and this leads me to the one thing that gets me into trouble a lot, which is that doesn't mean that the secondary character should do the overcome.
Yes.
So I still, and I get a
I
lot
know
of
you
flack
don't like the Lord of the Rings overcome.
I don't like it. And I don't like this the trilogy of Star Wars overcome, where Darth Vader ends up
Mm,
defeating the Emperor. I think those didn't need to happen, and I think they would have been stronger if you had allowed the main character to do it. But again, we won't go down that rabbit
yeah.
hole.
Yeah,
Uh,
we've
I'm just
dealt that
saying,
rabbit hole.
I
Yeah.
just want to warn: having the secondary characters be involved in the overcome is much different than having them do the overcome.
Yes.
Because then
Yeah.
why did I follow this main character? Why didn't you just have that secondary character be your main character and let me follow
100%.
them all the way to the end? Let let Harry be the if Hermione kills Voldemort, then why wasn't I following Hermione this whole time? Like,
Mm.
let Harry be a secondary character. So anyway, neither
No,
here nor
100%.
well,
Um,
and
and I
along
mean
the
that it actually, in J.K. Rowling's like to that point, in the first books, Overcome with a chess, like Ron does the chess set and Hermione does this, but it's ultimately Harry who's standing in front of the mirror of desire.
right, right, and that's what
Yeah.
I think. That's what you want out of your secondary characters. They're involved. They know when to get there. I think my favorite one of the stuff that I've done is still in Snurse, a Magic Fairy Tale. So
Mm,
Pont is your secondary character. She thinks that she's a part of a story. She knows that Snurse is a hero. She knows that she's a secondary character, but she thinks that she's the comic relief. And
mm,
so the whole story, she's acting that role because that's what she believes. And at the end, she realizes that she's not that. She's actually supposed to be something else. I
mm,
don't say what it is because it's
mm,
important to the overcome. It's also very sad. But, you know, she still doesn't defeat, and she doesn't try. I mean, that's the thing. Because again, she's a very meta joke throughout the entire
mm,
thing. She literally is calling out writer terms as she's going through the movie. So at the end, she doesn't go, "Oh, I was mistaken. I'm actually the hero. I will kill the wizard." That's not what happens. She goes, "Oh, I'm not the comic relief. I actually need to be the one that buys time for him to do his job because he's still the hero." And
mm.
so that's also me playing against the, I mean, I did that on purpose too, as a little rebellion to the whole, see, this is what a secondary character does. They stay secondary. They don't ever go, oh wait, no, I'm the hero. Like, anyway, enough of that. But that leads me to another thing that I think a lot of people, actually, I think a lot of people do this, but again, planning is the key in my opinion. But one of the ways that we accomplish all this stuff, exactly like we do at the very end of this, is you need to plan and look for opportunities to have strong bonding moments. Now,
Mm.
this could be all sorts of different things. It could be bonding moments where they're having fun and they are growing close together. But by bonding moments, and maybe that's a misleading thing, I just mean moments that define the relationship. So it could be a huge fight where one of them leaves. I mean, I think one of the big bonding moments, and again, I know it's not the right term, whatever you want to say, arc moments, is the Luke Skywalker Han Solo in the Rebel base, where, you know, Luke is just beside. I can't. What do you mean you're not gonna? This is what we are here for. We're here to do this fight and defeat this empire. What do you mean you're gonna take your money and go do your own personal private crap? Like, that's a huge moment for their relationship. It's not, and that's why I said bonding is probably not the right word for it, because they're definitely not bonding, but
Yeah.
it is the thing that drives Han. Because, you know, even though it happens off screen, you know, he's flying away going, "Oh no, I don't, stupid kid. He's just idealistic.
Mm.
I need to do this. They're gonna die if I. No, no, I'm gonna do this. If they die, they die. They made their choice." Like, you know, that discussion is going, and then he's finally like, "Yeah." Like,
Yeah.
damn it. Um, you just get that off screen, and that's fine.
But you also get a lot of bonding of Han and Luke before that moment. And I know that, you know, it's a short time period, et cetera, because they barely met and so on. But they do have moments of bonding. You know, when they're rescuing Princess Leia, when they're on the ship, when, you know, when she kisses Luke, when, you know, that whole, it's all bonding experiences. When they're shooting at the Empire, et cetera, et cetera.
They have
So
to leave,
yeah.
escape the worm.
Yes.
Or what?
Although I think that's episode 2.
Oh, is it? You
Yeah,
might be right.
the
That
the
might be
the
what
the
I'm talking
worm I think is, yeah. But yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of bonding moments between them. And before we get to that pivotal moment where they have the conflict in the hangar. And the conflict hits because of the bonding that preceded it.
Yeah, 100%.
It's like a plot arc. You have to have ups and downs leading up to your your pinnacle.
Yeah. Well, what I said about Han makes me want to talk about one of my other points,
Mm.
which I do think a lot of writers miss. I don't think they ever think about what happens off screen. And I think your secondary characters, to be real. So when I'm plotting, the funny thing is when I'm on my plot boards, I've got my top line, which is my POV character, but I'm actually plotting out all of my secondary characters as well. And I'm plotting the moments that are happening to them that are not going to be in the story. You know, like that Han scene. I would plot that scene. I'd be like, here's where Han has an argument with himself about, no, they made their decision. I'm not getting involved. It's a suicide mission. Damn it, I got to turn around. Like, I would plot that. I think you need to think about what your secondary characters are doing when they're not with your main characters. They have
Mm.
lives, they have goals, they have things that they're going to do. So we talk a lot about sci-fi fantasy, but, you know, we're doing a high school drama. Well, the best friend, you know, has got parents. She's got homework. She's got, maybe trying to get a boyfriend of her own or whatever. Like, all of these things, even though they're not the story we're telling, because the narrating character is telling their story, this character is still doing something. And so while it doesn't get put into the book a lot of the times, you still should mention that it's there. And these are quick. It's like, oh, what'd you do last night? Oh, I got in a fight with my mom, usual thing. Now, we're not going to tell that story, but it's like, oh, she has a mom, like, and they're fighting. Like,
Yeah.
that's a life. And so these off-screen moments for your secondary characters are going to go a long way of making them feel like they're their own individual people. Then you combine it with all the stuff we've been talking about. They have their own opinions. They have their own goals and desires. They have a reason for being there. All these things. And then you start, going, oh, also they're doing things that I'm not even seeing. And you let that bleed into the story. Those are important moments to really flesh out that relationship because, maybe, they're like, she comes back and she says that to her girlfriend. She's like, yeah, fight with my mom as always. I really wish I had the relationship you and your mom had or have. If that's the story we're telling, or, the character's like, yep, fought with my bitch of a mom too last night. Like,
Mm.
whatever the story that we're telling, it could be anything, but that's where we can get those moments that they're bonding or seeing the differences between the two or whatever we're doing.
Yeah. And I fully agree with all of that. And I don't know if you want to explain your matrix here.
Let's hold off on that.
Okay.
You have anything else on tips? Because I got one or two more tips.
I think the only thing is one of yours, which is moving from binary to triunary.
Okay, yeah, go. Or do you
So
want
no, I'll go. So the one of the things that you have to bear in mind now, some friendships are better as binary, okay, but trinary relationships, a three-person relationship comes with built-in conflict. Because what happens is instead of two people being trapped in a he said, she said a situation, or he said, whatever the configuration is, because you have a third person, it becomes a question of bargaining, right? So we have beef. These two have beef. They go and bargain with this one to try and get them to side with their side of the argument. And
Mhm.
that creates an instantaneous vehicle for conflict.
Well, you also have
Um,
room for, even in non-romantic relationships, you
yeah,
still have room for jealousy. They did it in um, Stranger Things in a couple ways. One, when 11 lived with the dude, the other dudes were jealous that he had a chick living with him, at 12 years of age, 13 years of age, or whatever. So there was the jealousy of that. But you also had the jealousy from the one kid who parents wouldn't let them play as much as the others. So even without the romantic side of it, you still had this. You guys spend more time together than I do. I'm the outsider of our group. And the other guys are like, no, you're not. You're just as important to all of us. And it's like, so even stuff like that, you have so much opportunities when you have more than just a binary, relationship. And then, but I mean, look at the big IPs. We have, we already talked about the Han, Luke, Leia trifecta. We talked about the Harry, Ron, Hermione trifecta. But even like Lord of the Rings, we have really a trifecta there because we have Samwise. We have, well, there's a couple different ways. You go Samwise, Frodo, and Gollum, or you can go Samwise, Frodo, and then Merry and Pippin are kind of one, because
yeah.
they're just inseparable little things. But that's still kind of like when they first start traveling, it's like a trifecta relationship because Merry and Pippin are so similar at the beginning of the story. They're kind of like two peas in a pod that are doing their own thing, that are bringing in that conflict, that are very different from the Samwise and the Frodo. And so even that you could consider, even though there's four, it really is just three in the very beginning of that. Merry and Pippin don't become their own entities until they, you know,
Until they're separated, yeah. But yeah,
uh,
I mean, it does give you an extra dynamic when you introduce a third person, because it creates that setup of the potential for bargaining and conflict. And as you say, it doesn't matter whether that is romantic or whether it is non-romantic. It's the same, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. Obviously, if you're doing a romance, having
Yeah.
that third rival, you know, she's trying to get the boyfriend, but he's looking at this other chick, and but they're all
The
friends.
resolution is we're all happily together in a threesome. Like,
And that always works for certain people, um, but it doesn't work
I've
for
written a
everybody,
threesome.
unfortunately. Um, anyway, all right, getting too personal. Um, there's two.
No, I mean, I've written a threesome couple.
Uh,
Like my
oh,
whole pre-stage things.
right, exactly, which is
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Um, there's two things that I actually want to talk about before we get into the last thing that you were just mentioning.
Mm,
Um, one, to get to, and maybe this is the reason why I never think about the toxic relationships that you kind of warned about earlier.
mm,
One of the things that I think is very important to always bring in to relationships is sacrifice. Your character should sacrifice something for their relationships, both sides. Now, for me, I live my life under the mantra, and this is every relationship that I in, our relationship, business relationships, me and my wife's relationship. I always, and this reason why I don't allow drama in my life, I say drama is only on the page, never in the real world, is because I only allow relationships in my life where both parties are living by the mantra of I'm going to try to give you more than you give me. And I'm a firm believer if you're in a relationship where you're trying to give the other person more than they're giving you, and they're trying to give you more than you're giving them, it's going to be a great relationship. Like,
mm.
because both are focused on the other person's happiness, focused on the other person's success, focused on the other person's gaining financial resources, whatever the relationship is. And I think those are the best relationships. But in drama, we have that element of sacrifice. Um, and I think that's important to help build those relationships. What is one character sacrificing for the other? What are they willing to sacrifice for the other? Is the mentor willing to die for the last lesson to springboard the mentee into the place that they need to be? Um, these are the things that I think are important to think about. What are they willing? Are they willing to sacrifice um their relationship? So like in the last Spider-Man movie, um you have the Asian dude that is Spider-Man's friend, and Spider-Man's like, I want to sit next to Mary Jane, I want to sit next to her, I want to sit next to him, so you need to sit next to this horrible girl. And he's like, you know what, sure, I'll spend an 11-hour flight next to a girl that I don't want to be next to. Now it works out well for him because they're boyfriend girlfriend at the end of the flight, but he still sacrificed, even though the sacrifice turned out to be good for him. He was still willing to, like, you know what? All right, fine. I want to sit next to you because being next to my best friend for 11 hours on a flight is much better than being next to some strange girl that I don't want to be with. But I'm willing to do that sacrifice. You have something to say?
I, I do. I think one of the best sacrifices in like the movie world ever for friendship is in Thelma and Louise.
Oh, yeah. I made a call to that earlier today.
Because that was a great sacrifice. With
But even in
like,
the beginning, where she sacrifices she had never broken the law. And now
yeah,
she's pulling a gun and putting up against the side of a cop's head.
yeah. And
Like,
she's like, she's going to giving up her life, her spot-free criminal, everything to go with her friend joyriding across the countryside, escaping to Mexico. It was,
and then they both willing to sacrifice their lives at the end.
it was fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that
Yeah.
is, it's just that buddy
That
buddy.
was a great example, by the way. If you want to do yourself a favor and watch a movie with like really good friendship as well, like Thelma and Louise is
It is. It's a
top
fantastic
tier,
movie. It is.
top tier.
So just think about that. And we write drama. We're not writing real life. We are
Yeah.
writing drama. We're writing an exaggeration of real life. That's why, remember, it's escapism for our readers. They want to come and live something they can't live in their real world. And
Mhm.
so sacrifice is one of those things that really up the stakes. And then the last thing I want to talk about before the four corners, I think this is important. I think you should understand that there is a love language that everyone has. And I think it's important to work out the love language of your characters because, some friends will be more physically affectionate. They want to hug when they see them. They want to, whatever. And we're talking about non-romantic relationships. So even though I'm using the word love language, the love language are still, no, I do favors. That's my love language. Or I do gifts. I'm a gift person. Or, whatever. Or I just spend time with them. That's, another form of the love language. There's all sorts of different ways to show your affection for somebody. And again, we're talking non-romantic affection, but it's still that same thing. And I think that if you figure that out and you be consistent with it, it makes for more realistic feeling characters, because they're like, oh, this is the type of person this is. This person shows their affection. And when you're all over the board, when the friend is showing all these different forms of love languages, it doesn't feel real, because that's not how people are.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think that if you define their love language, how do they show that they care for someone else, either romantically, non-romantically, whatever, and then
Mhm.
you can be consistent. It's sort of like if they have a speech tick, or if they have a, if they have a way of
A
walking,
gesture or some sort of,
whatever.
yeah,
It's the
yeah.
same thing. And once you lock into that, it lets the readers start to get comfortable knowing these characters. And I think it's especially important with your secondary characters, because of the fact that we're never inside their heads. So we can only show the reader a secondary character by what they say and what they do. And so
Mhm.
if every time they show up there, I mean, look at your favorite show, Ted Lasso.
Yes.
Like, what was his love language?
He would rock up with the cookies.
He was a gift giver.
Yeah, he was a gift giver.
That was how he showed. I mean, look, he did it
Yeah,
for everybody.
yeah.
He always had, I mean, even like the team with the sign, that was his gift to
Mm,
the team. Like, I'm giving you this thing. Like, that
mm.
was his love language. And it painted that character all the way through. And they looked for little ways to constantly show that's how he shows affection.
Yeah.
And so you know, that's a great thing. And it really does have readers connect to these characters. Now, obviously, Ted Lasso is the main character, but
Mm.
I'm saying you should do it for everybody, not just, you should
Yeah.
definitely do it for the main character as well. But your secondary characters, understanding their love language is going to help you run that character in a much more realistic way, as opposed to just they show up with cookies one day, and then they show up kissing them on the other day, and then they show up doing a favor for them the next day, and they show up, giving them money the next day, and blah 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 blah. We have all these different love languages that we have. And so honing in on that and figuring that out for your secondary and primary characters, not your tertiary, but your secondary and primary characters, although important tertiary characters. I mean, what's mom's love language?
Mm.
What's if brother's only in it for a couple times because he's not really a part of the story, but he's still that important to the character, I'm probably going to go ahead and figure out what their love language is. It's a part of my character breakdown sheet. For when I'm doing my character
Mm.
breakdowns, I want to know how that character likes to show their feelings toward other people. Um, Anything else before I do the story grid?
No, I think we've
All right.
covered the basics. Let's do the
So all
story
of
grid.
those are ways to help build secondary characters so that they feel more real and the relationships feel more real between them. But I want to go a step further, because I call this the matrix of the story, matrix of the theme, whatever you want to say. I've heard it called the four corners of storytelling. That's a movie term. When we're playing with a theme, we have two sides to that theme. So, like, we look at Star Wars. Star Wars, this is one I use in my class. Star Wars has, should you believe in faith to save you, or should you believe in technology to save you? And the character sits in the middle of that. And so what I look for in relationships are not binary relationships. So normally everyone's like, oh, I have my protagonist, which has an antagonist, which means they're opposite of what they're trying to do. So you have, if Luke is trying to, trust in faith, then the antagonist should be somebody who hates faith, who's trying to bury faith, destroy faith, or whatever. That's not in the movie. That
Mm.
if that's the definition of an antagonist, then there's no antagonist in Star Wars, because that's not the definition of an antagonist, or it doesn't have to be. It can be, but now you have this binary good versus evil kind of thing. So Michael Bay doesn't have four corners in his stories. He has a very linear one side versus the other side. That's it. The reason why I think having four corners, having these four quadrants, this matrix of your theme is so important, is because it really gives you a lot of room for relationships. So if we have Luke Skywalker in the middle, and Luke has to decide, should he rely on faith to save him at the end? In other words, the Force, something that's a power greater than himself, or should he rely on technology to save him? That means we have two sides. On each side, you're going to have a positive to that side and a negative to that side. So on the side of faith, we have Obi-Wan Kenobi. You should use the Force because it's a good thing. it does all these great things for you. It literally is good for the universe. It's good for everybody and all this other stuff. And then we have Darth Vader, who's like, nope, it is a very selfish way to get a lot of power. Nothing can beat the power of the dark side. And so you actually have this positive look of one side of the theme and a negative look at this one side of the theme. And so you have Luke, who's supposed to, and that's the side that he's supposed to end up on, but there's both good and bad. And he's got to struggle with, wait, do I really want to go this way? Because there's good and bad over there. And then we have the other side, which is technology, which is the side we're going to prove that we're not doing. But there's positives and negatives to that too. So that allows us to create characters and things. So we have Han Solo, who's like, kid, nothing beats a good blaster. Like hokey religions? No. No, you want technology. And I'm good, and I'm showing you how good technology is. And then you have the Empire, who's like, yeah, we can use technology to blow up entire planets. And so now you have Luke going, well, wait a minute, maybe I should choose technology because there's good over here, but there is also bad over here. And so when you look at this dynamic of Star Wars, it doesn't have, because normally the line would be diagonal if we're looking at the four corners. So on the top, left corner, you have the protagonist, what we're trying to prove. Faith is what's going to save us, the Force. And so the antagonist should be opposite of that. So really, if we had just looked at a binary plot thread for Star Wars, we would have had somebody who was trying to kill all Jedi, who was trying to suppress the Force, the knowledge of it. And we've seen this a million times in, magic. Oh, you should learn magic because it's good. No, that we've outlawed magic, and we'll kill any mage that even thinks about talking about magic. If you say the word magic, you're going to jail. And so that's that binary thing. And so, yeah, what you have is you have this binary thing. But if you expand that to understand that the side that is against magic, there's a positive to that. What is it? What is the positive to banning magic? Can I create characters that represent that cause the protagonist to go, wait a minute, maybe I should be against magic? I mean, because I really I have a good relationship with this entity, this person, this whatever. And then you can also have, wait a minute, magic is bad. Because if magic is good, then what's the con? What's the negative to that? Why did it get banned? And so that's where I look for in my stories. I want to find, and not all of them, in the novella that I just wrote for Harnworld, The Carnage of Karaz that just dropped, it's a very binary. I mean, it's a bunch of orcs sacking a city. It's a short story, or a novella, so I don't have a lot of time anyway, but it's literally two sides. And I don't have a lot of time to develop that, but that's short form fiction as opposed to long form fiction, like a movie or a novel. And so that's the last thing I think to think about with your relationships is, remember, you're telling a story, and your story is about your theme, and your theme has two sides to it, but it actually has four sides to it, because there's a positive to the positive side of the theme, the one you're trying to prove, and a negative. So it doesn't matter. I'm trying to prove that marriage is the best way to live your life. Okay, great. There are definitely toxic marriages out there. So we can come up with things that show that in our story. And yeah, okay, maybe dying alone as a Catwoman is bad, and maybe that's our antagonist in this. But there's also positives to being a single person, And so, can I come up with a character? Can I come up with a relationship that my character has that now shows the positive side of the side of the theme that I'm trying to disprove? And so that is what I call the matrix of a theme, or matrix of a story. And again, I've heard it called the four corners of story, which is what they use in the movie industry. And I think that is very important to think about when you're thinking about relationships, because that's where these relationships are going to come from.
Yeah. And I think that is a good note on which to end this podcast. And we will see you soon for another one.
Bye.
Good day to our esteemed listeners. I'm Marie Mullaney, and it has been a pleasure guiding you through the nuances of writing and world building. If our podcast has enriched your authorial journey in any way, please consider liking and subscribing. Sharing our content with your peers is a powerful way to support our mission and ensure we continue to deliver insightful and valuable episodes. Your engagement is greatly appreciated. For a deeper understanding of the topics we've discussed, head over to Just in Time Worlds on YouTube. It is a treasure trove where fantasy meets history and science. Every Tuesday, you'll find new videos that delve into the intricacies of world building, drawing from our rich real-world history. Whether you're a writer, a role player, or just a fantasy enthusiast, Just in Time Worlds offers unique insights that will enrich your perspective. Check it out and join the journey of crafting incredible worlds.
If you are ready to take your writing to the next level and work with a group of highly motivated, dedicated writers who are all working to not only improve their writing, but improve your writing, plus you get to work with me on a weekly basis, then I'll encourage you to check out writersroom.us. This is a website that I have created that I really wish I had 30 years ago. It's everything a writer needs to become a better writer. Not only do we do weekly critique sessions, both from other members as well as me, we have daily writing sessions, I do monthly classes, Q&As, we have activities, I do all sorts of learning exercises, such as I do a quarterly writing prompt contest, and just tons and tons and tons of things. So if you're ready to get serious about your writing and you want to actually finish that novel and have a chance of it being published, then I encourage you to head on over to the Writer's Room and join me there. And as a special promotion for listeners of Releasing Your Inner Dragon, I'll go one step more. If you would like to get 50% off for 3 months, reach out to me. There's a million ways you can do that. You can do it through starvingwriterstudio.com, drakeu.com, any of my social medias such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. Reach out to me, say that you would like to check out the Writer's Room for 50% off, and I will send you a link that will allow you to do just that. So hopefully you're ready to start getting serious about writing, and I'll see you in the Writer's Room.